Good morning, everyone. Thank y'all for joining us and making time. I know it hasn't been that long since we've been together, but it has been a little while. So I know your school year is off to an unusual start, but hope you and yours are doing well, and appreciate y'all making time for us to talk about the issues on the agenda for the upcoming SBOE meeting and other educator preparation related issues. First, want a quick reminder that this meeting is being recorded per our past discussions, just to make sure this resource is available if other folks want to come in and view after the fact. So want to make sure, give notice on that up front. Additionally, I wanted to just really quickly provide a quick reminder of the purpose of EPAC, and really we're here to advise the agency and board on matters related to educator preparation programs in Texas. So as such, SBEC has dedicated the Educator Preparation Advisory Committee members, and we're asking everyone, per usual with Zoom meetings in the world we're in these days, to please mute your microphone unless you're speaking. And because SBEC has set the membership for EPAC, we ask that we reserve participation and camera use for EPAC members, just to help manage conversation, make sure we're focused. Non-members, folks that are on the call, are absolutely welcome to reach out directly to TEA staff for questions and any follow-up you might need on something. We're happy to make time to chat about those things offline, but really want to keep the discussion here focused on EPAC. So with that, I'll give a quick overview of our agenda for the day. We're going to provide some updates around COVID-19, some questions that are continuing to come in, just to make sure we're surfacing those issues, and anything else y'all want to discuss, provide input on. We've had some questions come back up through the membership, and want to make sure we cover those. Provide a quick update on the State Board of Education meeting that was held 2 weeks ago now. Provide an overview and get some input around the SBEC meeting that's coming up in 2 weeks, and talk about ACEP closeout and then a few other loose ends. So with that as the agenda, Mark, any other bookkeeping, housekeeping we need to take care of before we dive right in?
No, I think that's it. We can go ahead. Again, appreciate we did get some questions that came from y'all, and we have placed those within the deck where, you know, we are already addressing them, or it seemed to make sense to address them. So we've tried to put those things in, and of course cite our sources as we remember to. So thank you for getting that stuff to us. But with that, I'm more than happy to jump in a little bit and talk, just as a reminder, related to the actions and related pieces around what's happened in kind of the world of certification and preparation in response, policy responses to the COVID pandemic. So we've shortened this up because this is stuff that most folks on the call are probably aware of at this point. And so just wanted to kind of run through what we've done and what we've seen. So the first piece is certification waivers. So there were, as you may know, based on the suspension of some rules from waivers issued by the governor's office, there were made available these waiver probationary certificates. These were certificates that were available to folks who completed every other part of their educator preparation program, who completed their internship in spring 2020, or completed their clinical teaching or their practicum in fall 19 or spring 2020. Those folks were able to get a 1-year probationary certificate without having to finish their testing requirement. And we do, of course, EPPs, y'all need to continue to approve your candidates for waiver probation for exams. Because that's the one piece that, well, that's one of the 2 pieces they can't do. They also will need your recommendation for a standard certificate once they pass those exams. We have asked ed prep programs to submit finalized spreadsheets with all of your candidates who are on a waiver probation. And hopefully I'm going to ask if you, thank you. All right. And we are, of course, encouraging for your candidates who finish their educator preparation program. All they have left is testing. They're working on a waiver probationary certificate. If they are in a field that is impacted by the transition to the Science of Teaching Reading certificates, where an STR test would be required starting on 1/1/2021, we are greatly encouraging you to reach out to those candidates and supporting them, reminding them about that forthcoming requirement. If they are able to complete their examination requirement and get their standard cert prior to 1/1/21, they would be able to get that standard cert without having to complete the STR examination. We will be talking more about that later in the presentation, but we feel like we can't say that enough because we recognize for these candidates, that can be a really big deal. So just encouraging you especially for your waiver probationary candidates who finished their EPP, they might be like, oh yeah, I've got a whole year to take those tests. We will be directly reaching out, and we encourage you all to reach out. I encourage them to go ahead, finish those tests off so that they can get their standard cert prior to that deadline, because again, that deadline is not flexible. Another waiver certificate category that we have, certificates. Our deadline for this recommendation is fast approaching. The last day of approaching of the waiver intern certificates being able to be issued is 9/30, because the language in the governor's waiver said had to happen before 10/1. So that's 9/30 as being the last day that those things can be issued. Again, these are for internships, but candidates can serve those internships, get this waiver internship certificate without having passed the content pedagogy exam. And EPPs, again, this is a regular internship, so you're providing all the supports that go along with internships. And again, we also have a spreadsheet that we do ask, once you've recommended all these waiver intern certificates, please do send us that spreadsheet so that we're able to track these candidates independently as they go through this system. So those are our waiver certificates. The next piece related to COVID that we'd like to kind of remind folks about is around formal observations. As you may be aware, there's currently flexibility that has been provided, again, by governor's waivers. And there's been updated rule language that was approved by the SBEC and then approved also by the SBOE a couple of weeks ago. Very exciting stuff. So for 2020-2021, the requirement that observations must occur in a face-to-face setting has been suspended. This allows for observations to take place remotely with video asynchronously. Observations are still required per Texas Administrative Code, and you do still need to report, your program still needs to report them to TEA using ECOS. But again, candidates can be remote, or they can be in the room with the students. The field supervisors can be remote or can be in the room with the students, and asynchronous or synchronous settings are allowed. I did want to flag, we've gotten some additional questions kind of like around this core issue that we are working on posting updated guidance, posting an updated Q&A. Hopefully within the next week or 2 weeks, we should have that posted and able to share. We will share that out in our newsletter, and we will post that on our website with some additional questions and answers that we've had come in, particularly from TDFE. Got together and got some questions for us. We always appreciate when our professional organizations kind of team up and get us sort of that concentrated feedback so that we can understand what's really going on. So we will be working on posting additional questions, following up on observations. So we'll be able to address those at time.
Mark, can I just ask a question real quick before I lose my thought here? So it's just based on the formal observations that we just talked about. So the expectation is not that these are recorded observations, correct? You said yeah, reported.
So no, the expectation is not that these are recorded. I apologize. Just that the language that was adopted by the SBEC allows for both synchronous and asynchronous observations. So they really created a lot of options, but it's not a requirement that the observations be recorded.
Thank you.
That's a great clarifier. Of course, of course. So as noted, we're working on additional questions and we will post that soon. We'll share that through the webinar. Also, one of the things that was shared with us from some folks out in the field that we did pass along again in our newsletter was that the US Prep Coalition had some webinars that they had done through the month of September. Some of that was about supporting candidates in the field during remote teaching and learning in a virtual space. And so they, were like, hey, we're doing this stuff. And we did share that along, and it's linked here in the deck, which we will send out at the end of today. Want to provide a little bit reminder about what's going on with field-based experiences. So again, the SBEC and then approved by the SBOE provided some additional flexibility related to field-based experiences. So the requirement that only 15 hours of the total required 30 hours, minimum 30 hours, may occur in a virtual school, that was removed for the 2020-2021 academic year. So virtual settings, videos, these things can be used for all of those hours. TEA, we have provided updated guidance. We posted a Q&A on our website for some additional questions that had come in related to field-based experiences. So that's a Q&A that's posted on our website. And we've also made available, and I think in this group and a number of other spaces have encouraged folks to check out the Texas Teach Like a Champion online site, the Texas TLAC, because that is available for Ed Prep program candidates. And it's a resource that can support y'all, as I know that everybody's looking for materials, resources, things to incorporate. Those have been made available to y'all. And we are working up, hopefully, again, within hopefully the next week or 2 weeks here, an additional page of resources and some guidance, some ideas about how to use some of these resources as you're doing field-based experiences. So again, I'm going to be kind of a broken record about checking the newsletter because that is really what we are using as our main conduit now. When these things post to our website, we are then sending out links to remind you all about and to direct you towards those resources as they come out, and we're posting them. So that's in a nutshell some of the things that have happened related to COVID-19 and all those pieces. Again, we've done a lot of stuff. We've gotten great feedback, input, and guidance from y'all, and we are super grateful for that. And we look forward to providing additional Q&As posted on the webpage and additional resources as we're able to provide them. The next piece I'd like to talk about is kind of what just happened at the state.
Let me give a little room here and see if anybody else has anything on COVID they'd like to raise, put on the radar. I know we said we've got some other guidance coming up, but I just want to give a minute here in case anybody else has something related that they want to raise or ask about.
JP Lund here. Can I ask a question?
JP, we've asked that we kind of reserve EPAC for the EPAC members, so feel free to shoot us an email or follow up offline. Happy to follow up that way.
All right.
Okay.
Mark, do you want to speak to Dr. Malik's question in the chat about observations and the 45 minutes?
I'm sorry, I am driving and I don't have the chat up.
Got it. So Dr. Malik asked if we're going to discuss observations more and about the 45-minute observations being done in chunks across the day and about that piece. And I think that's, yeah, so let you speak to that.
Yeah, so that is something that we've been prompted that we are working on posting an additional guidance that'll come out via the Q&A that we're working on posting. But the bottom line is that the 45 minutes is a requirement that hasn't been waived and remains in rule. But we are, again, putting together something that I'd kind of wait to post until we've got that posted to fully elaborate on that.
So it's in rule that it has to be a 45-minute start to finish time? That's difficult with the way that instruction is happening right now, not on 45-minute chunks. Yeah.
And we really appreciate that, you know, we've gotten to hear a lot about what's happening out in the field related to that. And so we've encouraged, you know, folks to really think about what capturing 45 minutes of teaching and learning looks like in a way that's meaningful and you know, your field supervisors to be able to give meaningful feedback and to be able to, you know, actually work with your candidates on it. And so look forward to following up on that. But yeah, that duration is the thing that's in rule.
Okay, and did you say when does that Q&A come out?
I hope that it's going to come out in the next week or two.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
That's one we've gotten a lot. We're trying to collect and bring as many of these things in, so in the next round of guidance we can put that out and have it to y'all instead of one shot. So I think that's close, but that is one we're going to try to. We can't fully solve the issue, but at least try to give a little more guidance around it to make things a little more workable, hopefully. Other COVID topics from EPAC members before we move on to SBOE update? All right. Wait time is a special thing in person. It's even more unique in a Zoom meeting, but wanted to make sure we gave time. If something else comes up later in the context of other discussions, please feel free to type in the chat or catch us when we give you room to breathe elsewhere. Thanks.
Thanks, Ryan, and thanks for grabbing that space. So the next piece we wanted to just talk about, because there were a number of items that were adopted by the SBEC and then brought to the SBOE, and so we wanted to make sure that we highlighted those. So a quick summary of SBOE actions. The state board took no action on the approval, which means that the rules become effective for items on 227, chapters 227, 228, 230, 233, and 235. I see Jessica's on the line here, and I wonder if she would feel free to talk a little bit big picture about the main underlying theme, why we saw all these adoptions happen.
Thanks, Mark. So these were the series of items that traveled in tandem throughout the rulemaking process, really with the intention of establishing those 4 replacement certificates into rule related to the science of teaching reading. So you'll see across these rule chapters, the implementation of the new science of teaching reading replacement certificate names. And then in chapter 227, we've applied the required PACT assessments to those replacement certificate names. In chapter 228, we've applied the preparation requirements. In chapter 230, we've applied the certification exams required for those replacement certificates. And in chapter 233, we've outlined the issuance requirements for those certificates and timelines. And then in chapter 235, there was the opportunity to reorganize the science of teaching reading standards so that they were applicable to our candidates who teach grades EC through 6. In addition, just an additional note in chapter 235, there was also the opportunity to adopt the special education EC6 and 6 through 12 standards, deaf-blind standards, and the bilingual Spanish standards.
And I wanted to highlight for y'all that there is there's a webinar that's forthcoming on the 30th here that walks ed prep programs through what all these rule changes mean to y'all. There is a registration link that's here. It'll be in the deck when we send it out, but it's also, we've been plugging it for a number of weeks in the newsletter there. So please do, someone from your program attend that webinar so that you can be aware of kind of in-depth of what, you know, these little tweaks mean for ed prep programs, adjustments that might have to be made. I encourage y'all to check that out. So the next piece and kind of the bulk of our meeting today is walking through and taking a look at what's going to happen at the October 9th SBEC meeting. So we've brought today the agenda items that are on, not every agenda item that's on the SBEC meeting, but the ones that we think that are of particular interest to this group. That includes what we're looking at with 229, the continuing approval item, and then discussions around certification test development update. There's a discussion and action item related to the EdTPA update, and a discussion around actually this committee itself. So we'd like to go ahead and start with what's happening with chapter 229. So if you've been following along, an apt viewer of SBEC meetings, you may know that we've gone through a discussion stage where we've got a lot of rich input, actually leading into that discussion stage, a lot of rich input. And then we had a proposal stage with the updates to 229. And at this meeting, we're now at the adoption stage. The big chunks that are happening in the updates to 229, again, the first one is the accreditation status related to the emergency declaration. This puts for 1920, would have all educator preparation programs to have an accreditation status of not rated declared state of disaster. Again, following what's happening in the K-12 system and acknowledging that much of our data just wasn't collected at the end of last year. Also adopts for future implementation the ASAP index, where we are bringing together all of the different ASAP indicators and providing a little bit of additional flexibility into that system. Also the student growth indicator, a statutorily mandated accountability indicator related to student growth in beginning teachers' classrooms. And finally, some updates into the ASAP manual that tell you how we do all the nuts and bolts of all those pieces. Wanted to this is something that we showed the SBEC last time, and I think it's useful context for when we are doing kind of big rule action like this, right? That we've done, we've had a nice long process where we've gotten to work with a lot of stakeholders and bring a lot of things before the board that's really guided these policy updates. So all the way back at the end of 2018, and it's towards the end of 2020 now, but all the way back towards the end of 2018, the SBEC told us, go ahead, take a look at the index, take a look at the student growth indicator, and we began working on that ASAP manual as well. All the way working from late 2018 through early 2020, we collaborated with a few different stakeholder groups, some ad hoc groups, some standing groups for the ASAP index development and for the development of that student growth indicator. We continue to update that ASAP manual. And then in spring 2020, with kind of the emergence of the COVID pandemic, we developed the accreditation status to respond to that reality. And we've also transformed the implementation of all of these pieces to go along with what's happening with data availability related to the COVID pandemic, particularly the student growth indicator, tying the implementation of that to data availability into any date. And again, we've updated the manual to support those changes and based on additional stakeholder feedback that we've gotten throughout. We did get, Zach, I'm gonna call you out. I'm gonna say thank you for sending along. You had a question related to 229 about ASAP for the 2020-2021 school year, because 229 is where this would happen. It's where one of the two places where the board has an opportunity around this. Hearing from you that you've experienced some issues with the start of school and scheduling observations and the rest. And I wondered, other than kind of what you had written here, Zach, did you have anything else that you wanted to share your concerns around this?
No, I mean, I appreciate the flexibility that staff's provided. I think it was the right thing to do for report only the 1920. There's always ongoing unique circumstances that we're finding out every day when we've got some districts that are quarantining specific grade levels and classes, with testing being an issue. So, I mean, it's kind of encompassed in that. I don't know where staff is headed towards, but it would be a great deal of grace provided and a nice courtesy to see reporting only for 20/21 as well.
So again, thank you. And you know, you're not the only person who's raised that, right? I think, in fact, prior to the last meeting, we had also had this. And at that last meeting, we did take the opportunity to talk a little bit with the board about this. And what the board kind of directed us and where staff is planning on working on this is that it's the board has opportunities to do this later on based on kind of the full set of data that they get in. So we bring 229 every spring. We've got updates to make, right? So next year, and this is what the board, you know, we got a lot of good head nods and yes, that we would move in this direction, is that staff will be able to collect this feedback and better understand the availability of data. So that the board will have plenty of time to make action related to 2020-2021 next spring, summer. So our plan, and kind of agreed to by the board in that discussion last time, is to go ahead and move forward with that. But I really appreciate you keeping an eye on it. And as we move into the sort of like data gathering and providing the full background to the SBEC, we'll be reaching out to this committee in particular to be able to understand, what have been the conditions on the ground so that we can fully inform the SBEC so that they can make a fully informed decision at that time.
Thanks, Mark.
Yep. Anything else on the ASAP adoption item? Okay. With that, I'd go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Jones, who will talk to us about the continuing approval item.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. It's good to see and hear from each and every one of you. We just want to take a moment and kind of give you a brief idea for the October meeting. Item 11 is bringing forward the programs that at this point are recommended for continuing approval review. The next slide shows that overall, this is kind of a capsule, if you will. 25 programs were reviewed in 1920 for continuing approval. 8 were delayed due to COVID conditions, which delayed receiving the next steps. 1 is still being evaluated. That leads us to the October meeting itself, where 16 are being recommended for continuing approval. The others will be considered at the December meeting, much like what we did last year, where we had 2 batches. COVID really slowed down getting started, and therefore that kicked the next steps coming late as well. The next slide kind of previews, if we could, what you can looking ahead to the 2021 review cycle. The question might be, are you even still doing program reviews in 2021? The answer is yes, but also we recognize the need to comply with TAC rules and statute for the 5-year reviews. So along those lines, this is what we've done to comply, but also to recognize our new norm in the COVID world. So let me kind of walk you through what we've done in preparation for that. On the week of August 10th, all the EPPs received all their notification information that they were officially part of the review cycle for the 2021 year. They also received the type of review they would receive based on the risk assessment model, and most importantly, the start date of their review. So they can start with that, they start backwards planning, getting ready for it. The programs that will receive an on-site review, they were, or the virtual version of that, which we'll talk about, they were notified in July to confirm that date of the visit to make sure that we were all in sync with that. The webinar was on August 26th. It was a training webinar that provided the nuts to bolt, soup to, how does the saying go, soup to nuts, beginning to end review of all things review cycle. All the materials were looked at, all questions were answered, and I know we had a lot of other people that was opened up to everyone, and it was very, very helpful toward kind of leaning toward getting us started. And then October is the official kickoff month for the 2021 review cycle. So let's talk about a little bit in the next slide. What will the reviews for this year look like? Well, you can see there's 3 visual representations. There'll be 3 formats. One will be the traditional desk format, an on-site format, and a new virtual on-site format. The desk reviews, the EPPs will send documents as usual for review to TEA. The on-site requires TEA staff to conduct the review at the site. And in the event staff is unable to travel due to COVID for a review that was supposed to be physically on-site but can't be, TEA staff will complete a virtual on-site review. Now this review requires the EPP to send documents to TEA to review, but will be conducted in the same on-site format using a synchronous digital platform. Virtual on-site reviews, the EPPs can expect a detailed audit evaluating those 9 components. We'll be utilizing synchronous digital platforms such as Zoom, like we're using today, or maybe Microsoft Teams. Though the staff won't be visiting the EPP on site, the EPP can expect the assigned review specialist will be available, will be communicating hourly It'll be simulating what we did typically during 3 days on site. Regardless of the format for the review, all the EPPs will be held to the same standards of quality and accountability during that review with an eye on quality and continuous improvement practices. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. We felt like we wanted to kind of take you where we are going to be in October, but also looking forward, considering the conditions with the COVID environment and what we have planned ahead and already communicated with all the programs. Mark,
Tam,
if there's any questions?
Yes, hi Tam, it's Rebecca Weinbaum. We're still waiting for that August 26th webinar to be posted on the resources page.
You know, I will check. I looked at it the other day. I'll look and make sure that it's up. We also had an FAQ that was posted that had questions that had come in during the chat, both from review participants. Much like today, we reserved the airtime to talk to the people that were actually being reviewed, as well as opening up a chat where people who were just listening in general, they knew theirs was not for another year, but they wanted to listen in. Those things were posted. So I'll make sure that at least they were at one point. I'll double check and make sure. Thanks so much. And it's good to hear from you.
Oh yeah, thank you. So would I be looking on the provider resources page?
Yes,
where,
it was.
okay.
Yes, it's
Right.
down there. It's typically down at the very bottom of that page, second from the bottom category.
Yeah, I've been watching and monitoring it and just checked it today, just now, and it's still not there, or it's there and I don't
We'll go back
see
and
it,
double
but-
check, Rebecca.
Okay. All right, thank you so much. Okay.
We'll look real quick, and Tam will put a link in the chat if it is there hidden somewhere. There's too much information on that page, and we know we need to clean that stuff up. That's on the to-do list. So Tam will look here in a second and post that link in the chat.
All right, thanks, Ryan.
And if there's any other questions, we're excited about this virtual on-site review, and we're looking forward to that. The program seem to be anticipating a good review as well.
Thanks, Tam. We moved through our agenda faster than we thought, so we're going to hold on our 5-minute break at the moment and pick back up with what will be item 12 in our SBEC meeting, which will be a discussion and action on extending the timeline on our Texas EdTPA pilot. Since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, the SBEC board has really cautioned TEA staff to remain sensitive to the needs of candidates, programs, and school districts considering this global pandemic. As our team here at TEA has worked in really close partnership with our programs who are engaging in our second year of the EdTPA pilot, we've heard from a number of our programs who are really deeply invested in implementing and piloting EdTPA. They're recognizing the scale of change that their programs are being required to engage in over the course of this fall semester, that a number of programs have recognized that this fall might not be the best time for them to be implementing their EdTPA pilot, and have really looked towards the spring, or have even inquired about the potential of extending into next year in order to give those programs an opportunity to engage in this deep learning throughout the EdTPA pilot. In addition, we've heard from a number of programs who are ready to engage and implement their EdTPA pilot come this fall. We have some of our programs intending to submit their candidates to submit EdTPA portfolios in the very first submission window come early October. And so recognizing where programs are across the state in terms of their current circumstances, in terms of their EdTPA implementation, with the SBEC chair's approval, TEA staff will be recommending that the board extend the EdTPA pilot for a third year, ending in September 1, 2022, rather than September 1, 2021. And the intent here is really to ensure that programs have flexibility and they're providing that longer runway for those programs who really desire to implement the EdTPA pilot, but may recognize the need to shift priorities given the current moment. With the proposed action, TEA staff will continue to gather data on the Texas pilot implementation. We'll continue to engage in the same level of support for preparation programs and candidates who are participating in the pilot. We will continue to provide updates to the SBEC at every meeting related to pilot implementation. We'll continue to work with Sam Houston State and their partners in the implementation of their study and the great lessons that they are learning. We will provide an update on the outcomes of our second year of the pilot in the fall of 2021, and then an analysis of all 3 years of the pilot in the fall of 2022. If the SBEC approves the extension of the pilot period during our October meeting, TEA staff will bring a rule action item at the December 11th meeting to codify the new review date in rule to September 1, 2022. Our SBEC board chair asked us to bring a streamlined visual of what the action would mean for the implementation of the EdTPA pilot. So you can see represented here that with the extension of the pilot to a 3-year pilot, this would allow an opportunity for a 3rd-year cohort of pilot participants and would allow for continued EdTPA submissions of pilot participants across those 3 years, and would allow for the collection and sharing of data across all 3 years. Given the recommendation to extend the pilot period and the need for discussion and action at this board meeting, our Dr. Cavazos, our board chair, asked for staff to bring the summary of year 1 EdTPA pilot data, which we had originally intended upon sharing during this October meeting, to a year-end review in our December 2020 SBEC meeting. So you can anticipate that full analysis of year 1 pilot data at the December meeting. We did want to share, though, that currently all EPPs who did participate in the first year of the pilot have access to their programmatic data, and we've had the opportunity to provide webinars that outline how to leverage that data for continuous improvement. And pause, and I've been taking a look at the chat to see if there were any questions related to this topic before I move on. Okay, well with that, my other item I'm going to share with you all is item 17 under the board meeting, which will be certification test development updates. And this primarily, as we have across the past few board meetings, is going to be primarily focused on science of teaching, reading, communication, knowing we are getting with every passing day closer to January 1, 2021, that go live date for the science of teaching, reading exam. I'm sure you all are sick of me sharing these slides by now, but I'm going to keep using them until we go live. But as we think about our move towards implementation of the science of teaching, reading exam, we're really thinking about a few buckets of candidates that we want to make sure that we're providing really clear and targeted communication to. So one of the groups of candidates that is consistently on our minds are those candidates who have the opportunity to be issued a standard certificate prior to December 31, 2020. This would include those December finishers who have the opportunity to graduate and be issued their standard certificate. And as Mark mentioned, this would also include those candidates that were issued the waiver probationary certificate in one of the impacted fields. And here, really the highlight is ensuring that those candidates complete all certification exams and that they complete all test requirements, fingerprinting fees, apply for their standard certification, and then receive that recommendation from you all from the program and have that standard certificate issued, showing up on their virtual certificate prior to the end of the calendar year. With that in mind, we wanted to take this space to hear some of the great practices that you all are engaged in to begin to push out this communication or continue to push out this communication to your December finishers and previous finishers of your programs related to the science of teaching reading requirement. I want to open up the floor if anyone had any best practices or things that they've been taking into consideration as we work to support these December finishers.
This is Beth Malik and from UT. and I don't know if this is best practice or not, but we have a relatively small group that fits in this category for December. And we had to do, I think we've talked about this in this group before, we had to do quite a bit of internal work, working around our normal systems because of the way graduation works at the university. So it's helped that we have a small group, but I think we've worked out a plan to address this for December finishers. And much thanks to people in this group who gave me ideas in an earlier meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Malik, for raising that. I think the coordination with Registrar's Office has been definitely a consistent point of feedback here, and I agree. I think that the best practices generated by this group really kind of helped push that topic forward. Any other best practices or communication methods that folks have been engaged in? Well, as we continue on, we'll have a few more opportunities to share out some best practices related to communication here. So if there's other areas that folks are thinking about, we'll have additional opportunities to share. As we move into January 2021 and beyond, we recognize that we will have candidates who are engaged in preparation in what we're calling our transition year. So candidates who began preparation this fall, but who will not complete their preparation until after the Science of Teaching Reading requirement has been instituted. And for this group of candidates, we want to ensure that they have a clear understanding of what their certification exam requirements will entail come the launch of the Science of Teaching Reading exam in January 2021. And then finally, we know that after the implementation of the Science Teaching Reading exam, our assessment structures going forward will require the content pedagogy, the Science Teaching Reading, and the PPR Texas or the EdTPA for issuance of a standard certificate for those 4 impacted certification fields. So our core subjects with Science of Teaching Reading AC6, course subjects with Science of Teaching Reading 4 through 8, ELAR with Science of Teaching Reading 4 through 8, and ELAR/Social Studies with Science Teaching Reading 4 through 8. And again, this slide with the bold red face always kind of jumps out at me as whenever we facilitate here, but just that emphasis that this is a statutory mandate and that the STR exam is required for the certificate to issue beginning January 1, 2021. So as you think about this requirement, we're thinking about those candidates who are currently enrolled in pursuing certification in one of those 4 House Bill 3 impacted certification fields who will not finish prior to the end of the calendar year. We're thinking about future candidates who are going to be pursuing certification in one of these certification fields. And then really importantly from our communications perspective, we're thinking about those candidates who've previously completed a preparation program who've not yet been issued that standard certificate, and those candidates who were issued a waiver probationary certificate who will not have completed all of their requirements and have been issued a standard certificate prior to January 1, 2021. We've been working to develop communication resources and tools to ensure that this information is readily accessible to candidates, programs, and the field at large. So a few steps that we've taken over the course of the past few months. We've stood up a dedicated page on our TEA webpage, specifically focused on the Science of Teaching Reading exam. We know that our TEA website is not the most user-friendly or easily navigated system, and so we have a dedicated URL. If you type in tea.texas.gov/str, you go directly to our Science of Teaching Reading page. I will say we've been working to beautify this web page and make it even more user-friendly and streamlined, and so you should see a 2.0 version of this website in the coming weeks as well. On this website currently, we have links to all of our science teaching reading standards, the test framework, the preparation manual, as well as a link to a short 15-minute webinar that outlines some of those requirements that I just articulated on the previous slides. That webinar has been designed to be shared with preparation program faculty and with candidates. So we encourage folks to direct candidates to that webinar in order to learn more about those requirements. In addition, over the course of the next few weeks, we'll be posting a frequently asked questions document where we've worked to codify the volumes of questions we've collected over the course of the past few months and ensure that there's a one-stop shop for all questions related to science and teaching reading. And again, that we've worked hard to write those that FAQ in a way that it's accessible to both candidates and programs and district partners. And then we've been excited to share with the fields some work we've engaged in around some informational one-pagers. So we know that there is targeted communication and some key pieces of information that need to be shared with a number of different groups of candidates as we think about the science of teaching reading transition. So we're thinking about targeted communication to our December finishers, targeted communication to candidates who are now currently serving on a waiver probationary certificate, and candidates who will be required to take the science of teaching reading certification exam as a part of their certification for each one of those 4 impacted fields. And so we've worked to develop informational one-pagers with targeted and specific information for each one of those specific groups. And you can see I've provided some screenshots of what those informational one-pagers will look like. Those one-pagers will be posted to our STR page as soon as they're finalized. We anticipate that being within the next 1 to 2 weeks. And then we will also share those one-pagers in our EPP newsletter. So you all will have those to access both via the website and in your email inboxes. We would encourage programs to download those one-pagers and send them via email communication to candidates, share them in upcoming communications that you have with specific candidate groups. We've worked to try and distill just the most core pieces of information so that they're user-friendly. In addition, we intend, as Mark mentioned earlier, to engage in some direct email communication with candidates. So we intend to directly email all candidates in one of the impacted House Bill 3 fields who have been issued a waiver probationary certificate to notify them of the science of teaching reading requirement come January 1, 2021. We'll be using our one-pager as the source of information for those emails. In addition, we're intending to email previous finishers without certification, thinking about the 2015-16 academic year onward to notify them of the requirement. And then in partnership with Pearson, we will be emailing all candidates who have taken a content pedagogy exam in an impacted certification field in the past year, notifying them that certification requirements will change as of January 1, 2021, and that they should visit our Science of Teaching Reading exam website for more information around those requirements. Again, with the intention of driving them towards these core pieces of information. We encourage our programs that it is the EPP's responsibility to communicate early and consistently with teacher candidates regarding these upcoming transitions to ensure that they are well aware of this requirement and take those necessary actions to achieve their certification. I see a question in the chat from Dr. Queen, and that if we can let you all know when we've sent those emails out to those folks that we've indicated in the direct email communication. The answer is absolutely. We will include that information and notify you via our newsletter that those emails have been distributed. I wanted to pause there. That was a fair amount of information around science of teaching reading communication. So I wanted to start with this first question. I've just outlined the science teaching reading website and the resources that would be posted there, those informational one-pagers, and direct email communication. I did have one other avenue through which we will be sharing this requirement. When candidates register for a content pedagogy exam associated with one of these impacted fields between October 6th and the launch of the science teaching reading exam, a dialog box will also pop up within the system, notifying them that the certification requirements will change as of January 1, 2021. So again, that's another avenue through which we are pushing out that communication. But we know that there's probably more work that we could be doing in partnership with you all. So I would love to address this first question. Are there any other communication methods that we need to be taking into consideration to ensure that we are getting the word out to candidates, to our EPP partners, and to Texas LEAs to ensure that there is a clear understanding of this requirement in the field?
Hi, y'all. This is Patrice. I can't say I can think of any additional methods right now, but I do appreciate the direct email campaign that you're going to be doing. I think that that will be really helpful because, you know, our main tool for communication right now is email and so forth. And so they get a lot of things from us, but I think an email directly from TEA is something that maybe gets their attention. So I think that's a great idea, and I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thank you for that feedback, Patrice. We think the more that we can get this direct communication out to candidates, the better. And so knowing that we will be sending out those direct email communications to those waiver probationary previous finishers without certification, and then those who have taken those content pedagogy exams within the past year. The one group that I will surface that we don't have the mechanism within our system to identify the candidates are those candidates that will be December finishers. And so while we know that you all are pushing out really proactive communication with those groups, did want to raise that you know, the more emails, the better, but that will be one group where they won't be receiving a TEA email. But for the rest of those groups, we're hoping the more we can pepper folks' inboxes, the better. Well, I wanted to see if there were, I know I asked in the context of December finishers, but I wanted to kind of open the question a little bit more broadly across all the candidate groups that are going to be impacted by the science teaching reading requirement, to see if there were any steps or best practices or lessons learned that you have related to communicating about the science teaching reading requirement with your candidates. It sounds like direct email communication is one that the programs have already been thinking about, but I wondered if there were other best practices or things that folks were taking into consideration.
I can add what our program is currently doing to support the teacher candidates that will be impacted by this test. They created actually a Blackboard course that is strictly for preparation with standards and practice questions on constructed response questions and just different resources that could help them. Luckily, our curriculum is currently aligned to those standards, but making it more explicit and just kind of giving them the awareness is a good way to support them.
Fantastic.
This is Patrice again. I'm interested in hearing from my colleagues if there are any particular social media communication strategies you've used that you think are effective to kind of supplement emails. We've experimented with different platforms and stuff, and right now we're really not sure and what's worth that effort for this type of information. So I'm just curious if anybody has any input on that.
Hey, Patrice, this is Christina at Sam Houston. We have a college Facebook page that in our students' introductory courses, we ask them to go and like and follow that page. And so we've been fairly successful getting information out that way because we ask them to follow that. We also have a Twitter that we ask them to follow. And so catching them in that introductory course and saying, hey, these pages are available on your social media, they tend to go and follow them. We've got thousands of followers on those pages now because we try and push those in their introductory courses. So that's been useful to us.
Thanks, Dr. Ellis. I see also in the chat that Frank Dykes from UT Tyler shared that they share information via Facebook, Twitter, and Remind. There's a number of programs that in kind of conversation have used Remind, which is that text message service as well. I see a few folks that are sending texts out to candidates, which is a great idea. I will say that those one-pagers would be a great source of content to share out via social media platforms because they are kind of more user-friendly visually. So something to take into consideration as folks think about leveraging social media. Great. And then any additional resources or tools that we could continue to work in partnership to develop that could help continue to push out this communication? And I know that oftentimes things come to us over time. So I will say that if there's any additional resources that would be helpful or supportive for programs or your candidates, please reach out to me and we will ensure that our team works in collaboration to get folks the resources that they need to ensure that this information is out to the field. We know how critical this is for our candidates across the state. So please feel free to reach out and we'll work together to get the content that we need. Some additional updates we wanted to share related to the science teaching reading exam specifications and curriculum alignment. We were able to release the science teaching reading preparation manual at the beginning of September. That's now posted to the Texas program website. We also had the opportunity to hold a webinar with the faculty who registered via our JOT form for access to Reading Academy content. So we're excited to share that we've provided 2 pathways for access to Reading Academy content. One, full access for those faculty and staff that registered via our JOT form to the Reading Academy blended model, full access to that training free of cost. And then we are also planning on facilitating in early November a Reading Academy deep dive training in partnership with our TEA Reading Academy team to really unpack some of the research behind the Reading Academy design, some of the considerations that the team took in as they developed that content. And really the intention of the 2 pathways is to recognize that faculty and staff were interested in engaging with the Reading Academies at various levels of depth. Some were really just interested in that research behind the academies and kind of recognizing time constraints. We wanted to provide multiple pathways that allowed folks to get the information that they needed at the level and depth that they needed. And then finally, we plan on continuing to facilitate our science teaching reading deep dive webinars with deep dives into each one of our STR exam framework domains over the course of the calendar year and into the new year. In addition, we did want to take this time to remind programs about the Science of Teaching letter of attestation. And this letter of attestation is required for all programs in order to certify candidates in one of our 4 House Bill 3 impacted certification fields. So programs are required to submit that letter to TEA by December 1st in order to indicate their readiness to prepare candidates for one of those fields. And what we do want to really emphasize is that programs that choose not to prepare candidates in one of these fields will have that ability removed after December 1, 2020, if they do not submit that letter of attestation. So it's really important that if programs intend to continue to certify in one or more of those 4 HB3 required certification fields, that they get in that letter of attestation. The template, previously we had indicated that if folks hadn't received it previously, they could email their program specialist to gain access to that template. Subsequently, we've posted the template to the program provider resource website, and so that can now be downloaded there as well if folks have not yet had the opportunity to submit their letter of attestation. And we did want to pause because we know that this was a real focus for the board during our last meeting. And so we really wanted to have an opportunity in this collaborative space to hear more from programs around the letter of attestation. So for some of our programs who have turned in their letter of attestation, and I know that there's a few programs who've just submitted theirs within the past few days, we'd love to hear if there's any key takeaways or reflections or thoughts that would benefit those that are still in the process of finalizing their letters of attestation. And I would say, not to put them on the spot, but we did just have a conversation earlier this week related to the letter of attestation. I don't know if any of our faculty from Inspire Texas Region 4 wanted to share any of their thoughts as they submitted their letter of attestation this week.
Jessica, this is Becky. Good morning. We were able to submit our attestation letter and secure all the signatures and work collaboratively inside the center to get everything submitted up to TEA. We're really excited about moving forward and helping to support our candidates, helping our students read, make them better readers in the classroom.
Fantastic. Becky, any considerations that you all kept in mind as you worked to complete that letter of attestation? So reflections that you've had related to your own curriculum development?
We wanted to make sure we were tightly aligned, and we're looking forward to learning more about in the blended model with the reading academies. We're also going to participate in the upcoming webinars for Pearson and the deep dives, and really happy to have the preparation manual to be able to study some of the samples released there as well. So some exciting times moving forward, just to be able to align tightly to the resources we're receiving.
Thanks, Becky. Any other reflections from programs who have had the opportunity to submit their letter of attestation? Thanks. On the other side, we also wanted to hear from those programs who have not yet submitted their letter of attestation. If there are folks that do plan to submit their letter of attestation, but they have not done so far, if there are any considerations that they're continuing to keep in mind, or any barriers that they may be encountering, we'd love to kind of surface those in this space so that we can really think about ways that we can continue to support programs. If there's anyone that would like to share.
Good morning, Jessica. I'd like to share. This is Barbara Maya from the director for the Teacher Prep program with Region 19 here in El Paso. So I wanted to say good morning. Great to see everyone, and I hope everybody is doing well and their families as well during this crazy COVID time. So we are in the final stages, Jessica, of submitting our letter. But I wanted to explain really briefly, as you all were talking about this, the rationale behind why we are still at this point. It really has been a very well thought out process, we feel, at the service center since last fall when House Bill came out, and we actually got together as an organization in our various departments to review House Bill 3 and to have that thorough understanding and that communication across the service center I'm very fortunate to oversee our alternative certification program at the Service Center and get the support and the participation from our other professional development consultants across the Service Center. So that was really important for us to sit down, get together, and have that understanding. So we were doing that in the fall, and then of course the holidays came up, and we did review, you know, what were the requirements going to be for this new curriculum. And once we came back in January, we're discussing what our options were going to be, right? So I got together, of course, this conversation was with my staff for my teacher prep program, along with my executive director. And we were looking and having conversations across the state with my colleagues, my counterparts, on what this was going to look like. What were the conversations sounding like? Were we going to get engaged? Was Region 19 Service Center going to engage in possibly some MOUs or, you know, these understandings with other ESCs who had already had their curriculum set, and we've done this in the past, and was that type of partnership something that we wanted or needed now moving forward with STR? So we were having those conversations. Then, to be honest with you, you know, COVID hit, right? February, March, and our program, our teacher prep program was all 100% face-to-face, all of it. So my focus then turned to having to then turn that over onto remote, because we were right in the middle of a cohort. And so everything was put on hold like many other folks, and that's okay, because our priority was how do we continue to support our candidates during this time. So we focused on turning this remotely, having to work closely with our instructional technology specialists, because we had to start reverting a lot of our classes into our Blackboard system and via Zoom, and you know, all of that's involved with that, right? So that was a huge reality, and really something that delayed a lot of the process. But actually, one step, let me go back a little bit. Right before COVID happened, actually in January, I was working very closely with my other director colleagues there with respect to reading academies. And actually part of the conversation, as we were talking, like when I shared with y'all that we were reviewing and discussing House Bill 3 and then some other changes that were coming up, was the advantages of our taking my TPCP primary facilitators for my teacher prep program to go through the Reading Academy training to become cohort leaders. So we were actually waiting on that. So I do have my two primary consultants that oversee my teacher prep training go through the academy, the Reading Academy training, and they did all that was involved with that, and now are cohort leaders. My rationale for that, of course, was to come back and have that level of understanding for my program. And as we were going to as we were going to update our curriculum. So that was really awesome, and they're doing it. And so then, but then again, that's where COVID hit, put all that in place. And then we've just been trying to continue with that. So we have now are in the final stages of updating my curriculum now. And what, you know, it's just the reality of where we are at and what we needed to do. And so what, you know, we've also chosen to do is Region 19's program was going to be one we wanted to develop or update our own curriculum. There weren't going to be any partnerships outside of the Service Center when it came to that. And we were bringing in our specialists, right, from the Service Center to assist in the updating our curriculum. So we brought in our early childhood reading specialist, content specialist within the organization, aside from my facilitators for the teacher prep program. We work very closely with ESC Region 19's Head Start program and brought in our Head Start facilitators, directors from there to assist and getting all that input. Again, doing this remotely, because up until today, we are still working remotely from our service center. We are going in only one day a week for a few hours. And now the numbers in COVID here in the El Paso region are still very critical. And so having to do that remotely has been a challenge. That has been one that is more, you know, a little bit more challenging, but we're getting it done. And what I feel really excited about is that we have the right stakeholders in place to assist us with this. So again, I'm at the final stages with this. We're getting ready to submit probably here in the next couple of weeks, probably no more, maybe a week. You know that we've been, you know, I'm excited. I've got my girls that are, especially because they went through the Reading Academy. And I have about 7 other cohort leaders in the service center that are assisting us with this. So the partnerships that we've created across our ESC and with the Head Start have been critical to the implementation of our curriculum updates within the organization, and then just excited about implementing that come spring. So that's where we're at. It's just really real, and for anyone who hasn't done it yet, you know, it's all about just communicating as much as you can, as best as you can, with all the other circumstances that are going on, and just bringing in those specialists to assist and giving their feedback has been something really that would be very helpful.
Thanks, Barbara. I really appreciate that reflection and transparency. I think, you know, what I heard from both from our program that who has submitted, and then from Barbara, as you share your considerations, is really thinking about that the deep and intentional work to build a strong curriculum that's aligned, that's strongly aligned between in-service preparation around the science of teaching reading and pre-service preparation around science of teaching reading, and really engaging those content experts to build a solid curriculum, while also recognizing that there are some real logistical constraints that we've all been under over the course of the past 7 months now to ensure that we're still moving those trains forward. So really appreciate that perspective, and that really helps guide our thinking as well. We do just want to recognize a name that December 1st, 2020 deadline is now captured in rule and is a hard and fast deadline. So we do encourage programs to, as you all kind of round that finish line, solidify and finalize those curriculums, to please send in those letters of attestation to us once you feel comfortable to do so, but knowing that December 1st timeline. If programs are experiencing additional barriers related to ensuring that they can successfully prepare candidates for one or more of these certification fields, please feel free to reach out to your EPP program specialist, reach out to me directly. We want to continue to support all of our preparation programs as we work towards this January 1, 2021 goal, and knowing this December 1st deadline. A few additional test development updates that I just wanted to name. So we know that we have our first slate of redesigned content pedagogy exams launching on January 1. So that includes our early childhood EC3 content certification exam, the STR exam, our educational diagnostician exam, and the 391 core subjects EC6 that again has been designed to ensure that we've removed duplicative content that is now included on the Science of Teaching Reading exam. You can see our upcoming launches over the course of the next year. And then 2 additional items that I wanted to name. We just recently wrapped up the test framework committees for our ELAR 712 test framework. And so that test framework went through an equity and content advisory committee review and is now being prepared to be shared out with the field through our content validation survey, and will be posted for public comment via our website before that framework is finalized. So just wanted to give you all an update on where we are in relation to that content pedagogy exam redesign process. And then again, did want to name that our bilingual Spanish, our special education, and deafblind standards were adopted by the SBAC at our July meeting, and the SBOE took no action in September. And so we will begin to engage in conversations with stakeholders related to the vision for those certification exams in the near future as well. We had a question come in from Donna Brasher that I want to address. Donna also shared a question in the chat that I'd like to address first because it's related to the science teaching reading. She asked if we're going to discuss scoring and passing the science teaching reading. What exactly is pass-fail for the initial time period? Is this based on 240 as a passing score? How does that relate to accountability for programs? Donna, thank you so much for asking that question. With the launch of the science teaching reading exam, as we've shared with the board in July, we intend on implementing an introductory period between January and September of 2021, during which we would implement an initial cut score that we would equate to a pass-fail cut score. So really a cut score just above what we would call the guessing line. So that initial cut score would ensure that candidates who have potentially been caught in this transition with the implementation of STR have that opportunity to continue towards certification. So again, a cut score that would be implemented during that introductory period just above the guessing line that would lead to a pass or a fail on the STR. I will say that during that introductory period, candidates will get a full score report. So they will get their performance by domain and competency and will be able to learn from that score report even during that introductory period. We will use data from our standard setting processes, our panels and our committees that engage in that standard setting work, and some data from our initial introductory period to establish the official cut score prior to that September 1, 2021 launch of our official cut score. I saw Mark came out of the shadows. I didn't know, Mark, if you wanted to speak towards the accountability for program. Okay, just checking. Sometimes we can have a conversation through our little Zoom screens. The accountability for programs will remain the same. So a passing score on 293 during that introductory period will be treated the same as a passing score on the 293 after that introductory period closes. Donna, to the other question that you shared with us, you inquired that you had noticed that maybe other folks had had a similar question, and that was that the 195 superintendent exam, would it be updated to reflect the use of TAPR instead of AEIS? That is an excellent question. As you can see from our previous chart where we identified sort of our planned content pedagogy redesign processes, that we work to kind of systematically redesign and update those exams over time. So while currently our superintendent exam is not slated for upcoming redesign, we will certainly bring this feedback back to Pearson and have a conversation related to what next steps we could take to ensure that there's that proper alignment between what's on our certification exam and what the expectations are for superintendents in the field. So thank you so much for us. We'll certainly bring that back. Donna, I hope I fully addressed your two questions. I don't know if you want to come off mute and if there's any additional clarification I need. I did see a thank you in the chat, but just wanted to make sure.
No, thank you very much. What you said about STR clarifies a lot, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Donna.
Jessica, can you repeat the introductory period? You said January 2021 to
really through August 2021. So beginning for 21, we will implement the official panel recommended cut score.
Jessica, this is Christina. When you talk with Pearson about the superintendent exam and the AEIS versus the TAPR, the superintendent exam also still refers to PDOS instead of PTEC. So there's some really outdated information on that exam.
Thank you all so much for bringing those to my attention. We'll certainly circle up with them, and then we will let you all know an update there. Thanks, Dr. Ellis. Okay, with that, Mark, I'll turn it back over to you.
Abdicating the responsibility. I'm going to advocate for the 5 minutes. So it is. I can't see it clean in any of the.
It's 10:20.
It's
So
10:20. Thank you so much. So let's come back at 10:25. Let's just take a quick 5 minutes to get a coffee refill and then come on back. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. And you make the call for that instructional decision.
That's us at 10:26. Maybe just a little bit for folks to just rejoin here. A chance for folks to catch their breath. I think we'll kick it back on maybe 30 seconds. All right, folks. Welcome back. We don't have too much more on the agenda for today, but we did want to give just a quick little breathing space. So the last piece that we'd like to talk about on the SBEC agenda is related to item 19, which is the composition of this very committee. So the Educator Preparation Advisory Committee, or EPAC, is the only board advisory committee that is in the board's operating procedures. Past membership of this board has included a wider variety of stakeholders. So right now, everybody who's officially on the EPAC is affiliated with an educator preparation program, and it is the charge is really kind of specific to your educator preparation program. There's not sort of a larger representation or reporting responsibility or implied reporting responsibility related to that. So that structure is actually relatively recent. So back in 2017, the membership of this committee was limited down to just educator preparation programs, and our memberships remained pretty stable since then. Again, EPAC is the only sort of standing SBEC advisory committee, and as such, we think there's a lot of opportunity to use this committee in a wide variety of ways. We also note that the content that the SBEC addresses and that this advisory committee could be providing input on impacts all aspects of educator preparation and certification. Actually kind of had this as we were going through what items on the agenda do we want to make sure that we speak to with the EPAC. There were a number that I think would have been great, but it's kind of outside the wheelhouse of a lot of educator preparation programs. And so we're thinking, you know, how might we be able to sort of expand and widen the scope of the folks on this committee? And also, this is a lesson learned that we had in our current coming out of the pandemic situation, and that's that we've been able to work really closely and really clearly with a number of professional organizations during the pandemic, because what that allows us to do is that there's sort of like a gathering of feedback and a clear line of reporting when we're having those conversations. And so we really felt, and we were able actually to see a lot of really good progress be made out of those conversations. So what we're going to discuss with the SBEC on October 9th at their meeting is an updated structure of the EPAC, kind of a more formalized structure, a more intentional structure for this advisory committee. And what that structure looks like is that rather having sort of like the membership being vested with an individual, having most of the slots vested with members from different professional organizations. So this would provide our professional community oversight into the membership of who sits on this committee, and it would also provide a clear reporting structure back to all of these different professional organizations. We would also, of course, have open seats from nomination. So right now, all of these seats are open. All these seats were by nomination or self-nomination, and the board approved them. We would retain a smaller number of those open nominations, but we would have a number of seats that would be specified coming from professional organizations. And we would expect, of course, that the actual members of the EPAC that are coming out of those professional organizations would likely be from, many of those seats are going to be occupied by educator preparation program representatives. But there's that sort of special charge of sitting there, as a member of TACA or sitting there as a member of TCTCT, provides you with sort of a clear perspective and again, reporting back to the professional organization. We think that this resulting advisory committee can include a wider variety of voices and perspectives from kind of all of these impacted components of education that, we may not have the opportunity to get that voice in the room just now. Again, easy structure, going back to organizations. And this is really one of the things that we were thinking about when we were thinking about this structure was that as an educator preparation program, right, you are expected to have an advisory committee that has a wide variety of voices on it, not just one, from one category, one type of person. So we really do see that this provides kind of an alignment with what is expected from y'all to be able to provide that same sort of rich, diverse group of voices to the SBEC to increase their ability to really hear from the field. So wanted to, of course, we're bringing this as a discussion to the board to hear what they think about it. We've talked a little bit about this previously, but this is really our larger discussion item with a structure for discussion with them. And I wondered if there might be an opportunity here if members of the advisory committee, because I think that this might be something that we don't know and I think would provide us with a lot of insight. So when you are present, in this meeting, what types of report outs do you do coming out of this meeting? Is that something like when you're talking with other folks coming out or even preparing for the educator preparation advisory committee meetings, are you talking with professional organizations? Are you talking with other folks across your institution? How does that look for y'all?
Good morning, Mark. This is Barbara Maya with ESC Region 19. So what we do at the ESC is after we've attended these meetings, which are full of information, it's critical that we just go back and we share with the entire ACP group. At the ESC, I have not only the teacher prep program, but we've got the principal program, and we've got our librarian program as well. So we go back and review, or excuse me, discuss what was discussed at these meetings, and then decide there what are steps moving forward for us, what we need to do, what other communication do we need to get out to other folks within the organization to have them continue to understand what we as an ACP program within the ESC is doing, why we make the decisions that we're making, and then of course keeping our executive director up to date. And then of course we put this all together and present that even in our advisory meetings, right? Of course, letting them know what's coming down, what changes are going on, and just making sure that we are communicating this. And then we then take it a step further, and I attend what we call our Personnel Advisory Region 19 meeting that we host once a month there here in El Paso, which is bringing together all of our certification specialists from all of our ISDs into one meeting. And so then I come there and make sure that they are aware of updates. So as I am working with them, as they are hiring or we're working on clinicals or whatnot, that they are up to date with this, the information or have somewhat of an understanding as to what the conversations are, type of thing. So that's what we do, very simply, but it's just about, communicating with all the different stakeholders that we work with on a daily basis, and then that meet either monthly or quarterly here in El Paso.
Barb, I wonder, thank you so much for sharing that. I wonder, I know that there's there's the professional organization for the educator preparation programs that are at service centers, right? I'm blanking right now on the acronym. I think it's TCEPP perhaps. And I wonder if that is a group that you share anything kind of coming out of this meeting with, kind of just thinking about, you know, again, coming out of COVID, it's very important. We've recognized how important it is for us to make sure that we're communicating in lots of different ways. Is that ever an avenue, sort of back to that professional organization, that you ever pursue?
Oh, definitely. So again, going back to my immediate team for our teacher prep, and when we go to, yes, our meetings that we have quarterly with our TSEP organization, which is a consortium that we have with all of the ESC ACP programs, right, are part of this. And we need to discuss updates, to support one another, just to align ourselves as much as we can and support ourselves across the state. So updates definitely come into play there. We share what's going on and how do we support one another, and making sure that we'll all have that same level of understanding. Did I understand that? I know that some of, you know, or did you understand this? Those types of questions are going on back and forth. Many of those stakeholders there attend the SBOE meetings, and so then they are familiar with what's coming up as well. So it's about all of us bringing together at this particular venue, right? What we are hearing, meetings that we are having, and how do we prepare ourselves as an ACP across the state to move forward with what needs to be. So yes, to your question.
Thank you, and for reflecting on that, because I think that really kind of gets at the core of our goal of, you know, of wider, of really broad communication, making sure that, like, it's important, you know, that we've got, of course, our direct conduit, and I'm seeing in the chat a lot of folks talking about that, you know, spread within your institution, being able to share with your advisory committees, and even, you know, regionally sharing with your ISDs. And I think that's all really great. And but you know, one of the things and one of the underlying goals, and Dr. Alexander's called this out a little bit, is, you know, the important information here, and that making sure that, you know, the SBEC is getting a wide variety of inputs kind of from across the spectrum, and also that the information that's shared here in these conversations are able to go out to folks as well, is we're really kind of like thinking about those cross-institutional sharing. I appreciate it. Dr. Alexander, can you talk a little bit about your work within the A&M system? Because that's, I think, a useful perspective as well.
Yeah, we've been coordinating across the system deans now for 2 or 3 years on a program improvement initiative. And so we meet, actually Valerie Hill Jackson meets with them weekly. That's more than I can do. But we do meet, you know, 2-3 times a year, and so they get updates at that time. It's not as consistent. And so when you were talking, I thought, yeah, you know, that's something I haven't really done. I do share this PowerPoint with Valerie, and we could always share it out to the other A&M system deans. I understand what you're saying about trying to get spread from this group to others, and sort of representation and requirement to go back and report, because I think that's the thing that we sometimes forget to do when we're members of committees.
I really appreciate that perspective. And I also, Dr. Brasher, I appreciate chiming in that reporting back to TCTCT. And Dr. Warner's asking about professional orgs we're considering. If y'all give me a second of grace, I will pull up the agenda item and we can take a look at it, because it is there. And this was just our, you know, we talked with a number of folks within, and we're really reflecting on from where, you know, were we working during this, while we were working through emergent issues during the COVID pandemic. So I am going to, give me just a second. It's at the end because it's a discussion item, of course. And there we go. And I'm gonna have to change my sharing. to being that. And I think here you should be able to now see a PDF and it says item 18. And I'm just gonna, so this was our first pass at gathering, this was our pass at gathering a list of professional organizations that we think could, that membership could be interested in and yield a member of. So there's a number here that I can read out. This is also, it is in the agenda item that'll be pushed out. But this includes TACD, TACA, the TCEP that we talked about, the Education Deans of Independent Colleges and Universities of Texas, Texas Association of Community College Teacher Education Programs, the ADOT group, TACO and TCTCT, the TDFE, so folks who are the directors of field experiences, being able to bring that specific type of perspective to this space to make sure that, and then have that also reported out. The Texas Association Teacher Educators, and then some groups that maybe we may not always hear on this board, but again, are important perspectives as we consider preparing all educators. So looking at the membership from Texas Association of School Administrators and TASA and TASB, the Texas Association of Secondary School Principals, to get some of the better of a K-12 leadership insight into this space, Texas Association of School Personnel Administrators, School Counseling Association, the Classroom Teachers Association, Texas State Teachers Association, Association of Texas Professional Educators, Texas American Federation of Teachers, and Teach Plus there. Now, also then in the paragraph that follows, that, where did that just go? Hold on, give me just a second.
Hey, Mark, while you're looking for that paragraph, this is Joyce Alexander. You
Yes,
know,
ma'am.
one of the things that strikes me is you've really got a board here that does two things. One, it advises you on some things that are at bigger levels. But two, there are times we get down in the weeds that I am actually not a good participant. Okay.
Yeah.
And I have to be emailing, you know, the folks back in the office. They're like, what should we do? So you've really got two levels. And the times when we get down in the weeds, these folks will not want to be part of the conversation. So I don't know if you need two boards or what, but I'm not sure, given that I've sat on this for a couple of years, that you're going to be able to solve both of your problems with one board. That's just something for you to think about.
And I appreciate that, Dr. Alexander. And one of the things that I think we were thinking about is the potential to use this committee as almost as a launch pad for subcommittees or for additional groups of deeper stakeholder input, right? So I think about the, you know, when we've done gathering stakeholder feedback related to standards in different areas, right? Being able to have a sort of this as a standing committee and then a subgroup of members of this committee with some maybe additional members that could go off, do some of that work, and then have a natural way to report back to our group as they've done that work. So I definitely see what you're saying. And I think that, you know, going along with this, we're trying to think about how might we better leverage so that we aren't in a space where we're, you know, all the way into the weeds. And so this will also be kind of, you know, and again, we're going with board direction on this. But I think that one of the, on the agency side, what we're thinking about is how might we be able to use this committee in such a way that it naturally creates subcommittees that are related to this committee, that share membership and that are able to address maybe some of those more in the weeds issues, and then not having, you know, where you don't feel like you have to be, you know, frantically texting folks to get input during a meeting, to be able to have more of those breakouts. I think that's some of the thinking around that.
Mark, I don't disagree that having representation from other organizations is a good idea. I think we've seen over and over that sometimes we bounce around ideas and then we present them to SBOE and then our school district partners come and testify and don't agree, and they have other perspectives. And so I really love the idea of bringing them in. What I am kind of wondering about is the list of EPP organizations. Not that we don't need diverse perspectives, but I'm thinking, like, at least in my boat, I'm far more poised to talk about a range of policy implications and procedural implications than my certification officer would be. She is really well versed in certification, but she doesn't deal with admissions. She doesn't deal with, like, there are so many other topics that we tackle that she would have no input on. And so I'm a little bit worried that if we take up, I quote unquote, take up seats with people that are not well versed on a range of issues, that we're going to actually end up with less input. I mean, I'm thinking right now there are 4 EPAC members that are members of one of those groups. So, and that's the only group we could represent. And so 3 of us will no longer, like, at least 3 of us will no longer sit on EPAC. And I think we all bring really good perspectives. So I am a little concerned about that. And then I do, somebody asked, how will the 5 at-large members be selected? And I kind of like to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Well, for sure. I think that we would source, same thing as we have previously, have nominations, and then we would bring those to the board. We would work up also included in the item is a sort of a rough outline for what a nomination form might look like, with some areas to kind of make sure that we've got that we're getting diverse perspectives also through there. So it would be kind of the process that we have now related to that. And I mean, I think that, you know, I feel like your example kind of highlights an issue where it's like there are certain issues, right, where I think it would be important for us to be able to hear from someone who's coming with charge to represent, you know, certification officers, right? Because these are things that we do talk about issues here, and would have the opportunity to further talk about those issues, and maybe include, you know, a breakout group related to that, that impact those folks, and that they are best situated to be able to provide feedback on. So, so I think that there's, you know, I definitely feel, you know, there's a balance here, and we're just trying to, we're trying to think about, and, you know, we'll have this for discussion with the board, and I'm sure that they will be interested in kind of like hearing and chewing on this. But I think that it is important that we, you know, and I think there's strengths here, and I think it's something for us for the board to consider that we'd like to bring.
This is Patrice again. I'd like to hear just a little bit more. I understand you're trying to get diversity of voice and maybe broader communication. I think the group is not really, I would disagree that it's well balanced. I think that it is heavier on the, I'm going to say K-12 side. So like where you have TASP and TESPA, and, you know, yes, we're certifying people in those areas, but much more of their work is sort of the on the ground stuff. And we do need those perspectives, but that's like a lot compared to the number that are truly focused on preparation. So that balance, I would really like for that to be considered. I have seen over the years I've been on EPAC, and maybe this is just my perception, I don't know if anyone else would agree. In the past, we would have much more like problem solving input kinds of sessions. And they have morphed to now they are more, we sit and listen about what you're doing and then ask some questions. And you all do listen and take our input, but I don't really feel as much of an advisory role as what we used to have. So I guess that, are you doing this to try to increase advisory capacity? And I'll say one more thing and then I'll be quiet. If you do want that to happen, there's going to have to be a lot of education for these new groups that you're bringing in, because I think most of the people that are on EPAC right now know enough pretty broad information about ed prep. You know, we're in the roles, you've got some associate deans on here. We pretty much have broad, we have broad look at EPP in our programs and across the state through our ADOT, which we have ADOT on there. I just know that if I have to go and sit in on a meeting for the, superintendent program, they have to spend a lot of time getting me up to speed on stuff. I had to spend a lot of time learning that when I came into this role, because I've been focused on teacher ed, so I'll be quiet.
But Dr. Roy, I really appreciate your input, and I wanted to actually ask you, because you bring up the point of being able to sort of collectively problem solve, right? And being able to engage more in that kind of along those lines. And I think something that there's a challenge of is if we're collectively problem solving as a group of educator preparation programs, is that we may not even understand what some of our blind spots may be. And so that when we then, so here as staff, we get to work with y'all, we get those recommendations, and then we go and we would talk to, maybe our K-12 HR folks. We would say, hey, this is what we're looking at. And then they make it clear how that may not work for them, right? And so then what's lacking then is the direct line of communication. So that room where the conversations and the problem solving is happening ends up being siloed. And so I think one of the goals here is to de-silo that and to allow us to actually collectively and collaboratively work in that space, rather than having to ferry, what about this, and this isn't going to work for them, and that isn't going to work for them, and that sort of thing. And so similar to when you get invited into perhaps like you said, your superintendent programs, do you think that do you think that there's an opportunity for more collaborative problem solving if we've got folks in the room? I understand what you're saying about the education, but I think that this is some of the tension that we feel when we, do have those sort of engaging in problem solving pieces, and then we have to take it to other stakeholder groups, and just trying to provide that kind of actually engage in that rich problem solving conversations with a wide variety of perspectives.
Yeah, I can see the benefit, as I said. What I was saying was I think it's a little bit out of balance, the list that you have here. I think, yes, I think that the meetings will need to be much differently structured and facilitated differently in order for you to meet the goal that you have. I think it'll take some really expert communication and planning, and I think that possibly using some of the processes from improvement science and that kind of thing that Raise Your Hand Texas, we've really been learning those things about how do you do collaborative problem solving and all of that kind of stuff. What I do not want to lose, though, is the chance for us in this community of EPPs to really share in the way that we have. And I'm really worried that when you shift the nature of this group, that's what's going to happen. And so I just wonder if there is another way to accomplish what you want to do, besides kind of just this kind of blows up the EPAC and makes it extremely different than what it is right now. So I hear what you're saying about the input and the balance, but there's also some value in what we've have had here, and so I'm not opposed to it. I would like you to take a look at this list and make sure that you are what you say you're trying to do, which is balance the perspectives. I don't think they are. And then also consider, how can we retain what we have here?
Dr. Werner, I asked for a little clarification around the balance concern. Are there specific organizations from the K-12 side you think maybe shouldn't be part of this group, or maybe additional voices from the EPP side that should be part of the group? We tried to capture all the acronyms we could come up with sort of across the K-12 spectrum, and think it does still end up tilting more toward EPP representation rather than K-12 representation. So that's one question. I'd love more input from you or anyone else on the group for folks that maybe shouldn't be considered. And then the second point is EPAC in the past, so, you know, I've been around this a little while, did have voices from K-12 in the room as part of the discussion, and it's ebbed and flowed through the years. So there was a time when it was more balanced, then there was a time when there were fewer K-12 folks, and then there is the kind of the current construct where it's only EPP representation. So just that is sort of something that's been part of our discussion as well.
Ryan, so just counting real quick, the current organization, or the current way that this is proposed, would end up with one more school district member than EPP member. I think if I counted that right, there are 11 school district organizations or represented there, and 10 EPP representatives. I am wondering about Teach Plus being included on the list. All the rest of them are Texas organizations that represent some facet of Texas EPPs or Texas schools, but Teach Plus isn't. That's a national organization. Teach
Plus has a Texas organization, just like
but
USTA is part of NEA, AFT is part of National AFT. Teach Plus Texas has a Texas organization, just like those.
Yeah, but their role isn't like as a professional association. The rest of these are all professional associations. Teach Plus has a different mission. Their mission isn't to represent a group of educators. They do policy work. They do good work, but they're not like you don't join it as an educator to become a member of that organization. That's not the role. So that's just the only one that's a little different than the rest of them. I would suggest that you maybe consider keeping the current structure of EPAC and adding school district representation instead of completely demolishing the way that EPAC is currently structured. I would love to have the school representation here. I really hate when we end up in an SBEC meeting and end up on opposite sides of one another on issues, because we just didn't have the chance to talk about it before we all walked into the room. I would love the opportunity to have that not happen anymore. But I do like the current makeup of EPAC and would hate to lose the voices that are already here. So
can you provide, like, I think one of the things we realized is that there wasn't a lot of structure around the current EPAC makeup. It was just kind of people that wanted to do EPAC through the years is sort of who it was, and maybe that is what you're speaking to. So I'd love to hear you flesh out a little more about, is it just the people that you were talking about, or is there some structural aspect? Because I'm not sure we know what the underlying structure of the organization as it's constructed is, that we could define that.
I think that what you've gathered here are the primary group of people in the state who care about teacher preparation policy. And I think that that's unique. Not everybody cares about policy. Not everybody wants to work in the weeds and the minutia of the way this rule is worded and the implications of that. And so I think you actually have a really good a good group of people here that think about these issues day in and day out. Not that people in the other organizations don't. They do in their own world, in the world that they work in. But the group that you have here are mostly directors of teacher prep programs. They're not the deans that are thinking about 9,000 other things. They're not the certification officer that's only looking at the certification aspect, or the field experience director that's only thinking about clinical teaching and internship. What you mostly have on this group are the people that are taking a broad look at educator preparation and what does that look like and what are the policy implications of things that are proposed. And so I know that maybe that feels really loose to you, but it seems really valuable to me. And I think that maybe you lose something if all of those people don't have the opportunity to be at the table. And so maybe consider converting all of the EPP, quote unquote EPP seats to at-large seats, and reserving, this percentage will be from ACPs and this will be from universities, or however that makes it a little more structured. But I would like the opportunity for the people that are in this room. You're going to lose a lot of the people that are in this room, this virtual room, because of the way that this is structured. There's just not a spot for us to fill. Most of us are not members of TACO. We couldn't represent TACO. We're not members of TDFE. We couldn't represent TDFE. There are just very limited organizations that we could represent of the people that are already in the room. And I think we have a good group as it is.
Mark and Ryan, I would also say that I can appreciate the list that you have put together. I think that those people do have a voice in education and what we do. I think a lot of those seats are also represented in CSOAP and on the CSOAP board. Some of them are. So that could be something that we could consider working through the CSOAP organization, because a lot of those are familiar through CSOAP. But what I really appreciate about this group is I appreciate that although this proposed group may look at the trees, the top of the tree line, I feel like this group really digs down and can give you a perspective of boots on the ground and what we are seeing and how these rules are affecting programs and candidates and what we're hearing from school districts. And I appreciate that kind of feedback that I don't feel like I would see from some of these others, as I have sat on the CSOAP board myself. I don't see that some of those meetings sometimes dig down in the weeds like we've talked about. And this is very important feedback, I feel, for staff, for you to know what we're seeing, how these things are being implemented, and how it's affecting our teacher preparation. And I think that that will be an important element that we would miss.
And I think that's a big part of what we're trying to get at as far as the boots on the ground on sort of the quality of educators being produced, and that input as far as not just on the quantity, supply, sort of on the preparation side, but also sort of the impacts in the field. And I think that's why we looked at sort of having a broader cross section. But I think this is really interesting and insightful conversation. I think the point you raise about the input of, so the thing that was particularly valuable to us during COVID that we realized was that the professional organizations were working together within their organizations to channel cross-institutional perspectives that were very valuable and weren't just individual programs representing individual program interest. And so I think we saw that, and we saw this as a way to bring that together to problem solve across organizations. And I don't know, I would think we have most of these organizations or members of most of these organizations represented on EPAC currently. I'm not sure, but it's sort of the two-way conversation, and we were finding that, we were surprised to find that a lot of problem solving was happening in EPAC that we had assumed was happening within these groups and within CSOT, within some of these larger things. So it seems like there is a broader need for EPP cross collaboration across different types of EPPs, as well as surfacing the voices from all the different organizations. So this is really insightful perspective.
Yeah, and Ryan and Mark, I'm going to echo what Christina had to say, what Ray had to say. I think it's good to get stakeholder feedback. I'm just looking from an alternative perspective. We've got 7 members on EPAC. At best, we would have a dedicated seat under TACA and then potentially under the ESCs. You know, I'm a little bit biased, obviously, but to give a seat to the counseling association when, in terms of educator preparation, I don't know if we've ever talked about the counselor other than when it went to a 36-hour master. So that's someone taking a seat from another alternative program. So I like the idea. Perhaps it needs to be more like a House of Representative where different organizations have different voices that are on there. There's a different level of number, one for a counselor, but TACA gets 3 or 4. I think that would probably feel a little bit better to me in terms of representation. And then if you just looked at, you know, Title 19 Part 7, there's 17 different chapters. Half of those we're not going to discuss, we're not going to get into. Of the half we do get into, 227, 228, 229, I don't know how much feedback you're going to get from these various organizations, but I feel strongly you would lose a great deal of feedback without the representation that Christina was talking about in terms of the 26 members that are currently on EPAC that are dealing with this day in and day out. So that would just, I'm for different voices. The format itself, it doesn't sit real well with me the way it's presented right here, just because I think you're losing what EPAC was intended for.
And Zach, I really appreciate that. And one thing that, again, and this came up when I was really seriously building the agenda for today, is I feel like some of the things that we don't talk about is because those people aren't in the room. And I feel like we would benefit from talking about them. Do you know what I mean? And
oh, sure. But like, what would have been an example today where, given the board, and this is a lighter board agenda than what we've had in the past, but I just don't know. Again, I'm for it. I think it should look. I just don't know if this is the best option to have a 31-member board when, like, I mean, call it what it is. The ACPs, who are the majority provider of teachers, have a seat. That doesn't seem to give a true representation or voice of what's really happening in educator prep.
4 teacher associations, for example.
And I think that teachers have a perspective about educator preparation and educator preparation policy. I mean, they are.
Of course, of course they do, of course. But, you know, what was just said about the balancing of voices is what we keep coming back to. And I think something I don't appreciate is you ask for our input, but then counter with arguments for your position like you've already decided. And that's something else that's just been more prevalent in EPAC in the last few years. It's like we give our input, but then it's like, I don't mind pushback with a different perspective, but when it's like, well, we're saying this again the same way. So I'm feeling my, I'm feeling a little like it's a disingenuous conversation when everything someone says is like, well, no, here's what we think again, you know. So I just, sorry, I really needed to say that.
No, that's fine, Dr. Moore, and I appreciate, so let me take the opportunity to share some of the notes that I've had, because I'm probably not doing a good job of that, right? So I think that both in the chat and in the conversation, we've had some really good talk about the questions of representation for sort of the numbers of educators that are prepared, right? And I think that that is really good feedback for us to think about. And, when we are, because our next step, right, is we get to talk to the board about this, and we get to share not only the item as it's put together, but what came from the advisory committee. And we've heard that there's questions of, will there be enough representation? Will these folks be able to speak to all the different issues that we talk about here? And I think that that is, that's where I was just trying to share our perspective, is that I think that just like there's things that, some of the folks on this list may not be able to speak to, I think there's also some things that we could speak to if we had some of the folks on this list. And I just wanted to share some of our background rationale around this. I think we've also heard that there's, from the committee here, is that there is folks who know a lot about education policy, and that there is concerns that there might be some loss or brain drain if that members weren't, allowed to continue on in this place. And I think we've also heard that questions about the inclusion of non-professional organizations and kind of the road that goes down. And I think that that's really useful feedback for us. And so I think what we've gotten is a lot of, but there's also been support in the comments for the inclusion of additional organizations, and thinking about, what some of the reporting structures are and how stuff might get reported. And so I think that I wanted to make sure that we were hearing voices and having sort of these conversations. And I was just making sure that we were kind of transparently sharing where it is that we're coming from on this thing. And I do think that we have the opportunity to have rich discussions. I think that that our goal behind this was to broaden that. And that's kind of where, the notes so far that I've been able to gather from our talk around this thing.
I made a suggestion, this is Beth Malik. I made a suggestion in the chat about the possibility of keeping a similar composition to what we currently have in EPAC, with the change of adding like a certain percentage of EPAC would include representatives from some professional organizations. So you, like, let's say 25%. You would have, and you wouldn't have all of these, because then our group would be way too big. So you would maybe have a group, the groups that are most likely to have relevant perspectives to the kinds of things that we typically discuss. So like if you have the current composition, you've got a lot of these teacher education organizations sort of covered, because you're going to still have more EPP members sort of on the group. And so maybe you have someone from TASA, and maybe you have one from a principal group. Maybe you have one from one teacher's organization, so you pick a few professional organizations to add some representation, a different perspective, but you still have the bulk of the EPAC are people who actually are in varying levels, I'm using quotes here, on the ground, right? So people who are more sort of in the weeds, and I think we said earlier, some of us are more in the weeds or know more about certain things than others. But I do think if you go to all, after listening to this discussion, I think if you go to all reps, you lose some of the possibility of problem solving, the kinds of problem solving conversations that we have.
Could you say just a little bit more about that last point? Because I think that's really useful perspective.
Yeah, I think that it's getting back to, I don't know who said it, maybe Patrice said this, this idea that because the people sitting in this current group, and I'm not necessarily arguing that all of us who are on it now continue forever, but the kinds of people you have on this group now are able to share things that are enough on the ground that give you feedback you need when you're making decisions at the SBEC level. So things for me personally, things that others in this group have shared were news to me because I'm not on the ground enough, and they were really critical points that came up and were very important to how we think about enacting policy across groups. And so I think the problem with going to all reps, I think, is you lose that sort of up close on the ground problem solving. But I also agree that it would be helpful to have representatives from some other groups. We've had this conversation when we discussed Ed TPA. We thought together about, what do school administrators think? How is this affecting the districts? So having a few representatives from sort of key stakeholders, I think would be helpful, but you don't want the key stakeholders to outweigh the perspectives that are brought to you by the EPP on the ground people. Was that enough?
Yeah, sorry, I was taking a note.
Okay.
You know, we've had an organization in Central Texas, our Central Texas Council for Educator Preparation. We have not been meeting since the pandemic started, but it is an organization that with K-12 and EPPs in our Central Texas Region 13. And its purpose was kind of what you're saying there, is for us to come together. Often someone from TEA comes, Ryan's been there. I think, Mark, you've been to them before, kind of sharing what's the latest on what's happening with SBOE and all of that kind of thing. And then we would have some rich discussions about that and sort of hearing perspectives. I'm wondering if there would be a way to have different kinds of meetings across the span of a cycle, an SBOE cycle, where you have broader representation sometimes, but you have more focused representation at other times that would maybe get at both of the needs that at least that I see. And I don't have a big stake in this. I know I've gotten a little bit passionate, but I'm going to be retiring in a year or two. You know, I do feel strongly about having had the opportunity. It's been a real honor to be on this, but it's, you know, my comments are not coming from a place of like, I may go off this board, you know, that's going to happen, not, you know, in the not too distant future anyway. So, but I have, when you get to this point in your career, you really think about what you're leaving behind. And so this is an opportunity for me to share those thoughts. And so the idea of kind of different types of meetings might be a way to build what you're trying to get at, keep what we have. And I think lots of people on the committee have voiced, we think this has been valuable to us and to y'all. And so we can maybe there's another way to do it or have things structured so you can meet multiple goals.
Mark, and just really quickly before you go on to something else, I just want to represent the voices for me as one of the directors at an ESC, and having the honor and the privilege of overseeing our ACP. I need to echo, especially when Patrice first spoke, I agree that we have what EPAC has evolved to from when it started, and I've been fortunate to be there for already a while, and trying to stick to the fidelity of what it was, bringing these voices into play, because, you know, again, I'm quoting as well, you know, those of us that are out on the ground and working, has been critical and has been, I think, one of the key things that has made EPAC so successful. and made it what it has evolved to. And yes, I do believe also that at the beginning we did do a lot more problem solving within this group, and it has somewhat changed a little bit to listening more to what is forthcoming. I think that we need to go back to having those very real conversations about what's happening here in West Texas, what's happening in Central, what's happening at the university level, what's happening within an ACP program, to make those decisions really real, and having these types of conversations that I'm afraid might be lost if we were to really change this drastically. I do appreciate the opportunity of us having the voices and not trying to take away from others. But this has evolved to something very substantial and have made you all very successful in what you're doing. And I just want us to just keep in mind, I'm sharing this with you, with Mark and Tam as well, to sticking to the fidelity of what EPAC is, and to, you know, how it got started and why. So, but I do want to, I appreciate what Patrice and the others have said, and I, you know, I echo what those sentiments.
I know we've also had a lot of great stuff. Thank you, by the way, everyone, for sharing. And I think that it's given us a lot to think about and to share also a broader perspective with the board from y'all. I think that we also have a lot of great stuff that's been captured in the comments, and I really appreciate that as well. I don't want to be reductive, but I do think that we have heard some support for finding ways to include some additional voices in this room. But we've also heard support for ways to retain a lot of the voices in this room that have that kind of boots on the ground experience. And I think that the different pieces that folks have shared will help us kind of further elucidate that. But, you know, as again, from the problem solving that we've been kind of rapidly engaging with during the current pandemic has, you know, it made a few things clear for us. And one, as Ryan shared, is that we do get a lot of really good and actionable feedback when we're able to, in some places, work with members of professional organizations because of that sort of that additional charge. And I think that helped that shaped some of our thinking around this, very truthfully. And we're really grateful for being able to do that work. And then the second piece that I think really has emerged during this has been that, you know, that need for the end users, right? For the folks who, for districts, for teachers, and the like. And so I think that I really appreciate this rich discussion, and I feel like we've gotten a lot out of it. And I think that it sets us up very nicely to have a rich discussion with the board on this item. Because this is this is a discussion item. This isn't a, you know, and we're not, this is the way or the highway, but I think this puts us in a really good position to have a well-informed discussion with the board on this item. Ryan, is there anything?
Yeah, one piece I would add in addition to the things that you identified is that I think one of the things that in my early tenure of being in this role that I assumed was happening was that the information shared at EPAC was going back out to all the respective sorts of roles, organizations, and funneling to all preparation programs. And that was sort of bubbling back up through EPAC. Like I had always imagined that it was sort of a representative thing in that way. And we sort of took for granted that communication was happening and didn't do as much outreach through all the different organizations because we looked at that as sort of like, you know, we try to communicate out through our many channels that we communicate through, but we expected that more of that problem solving rationale background heads up was being communicated back. And I think that's why Mark led with that sort of initial question is how is that being shared through your professional organizations that almost all of you are members of. And I think we came to understand that that was not happening as much. And that created some real gaps, because it was a real privilege to be on EPAC because you had insider information and you were sort of in the room where it happened, as they say. And others were sort of left in the dark a little bit and didn't have some of that context. And so I think whatever we do, however we recommend SBEC move forward, however SBEC decides to move forward, I think this is a broader thing that we need to do in the space. And it's far beyond EPAC. It's just in the broader educator preparation atmosphere, is that sort of cross communication and communication to all programs, not just the few that are selected to be on EPAC.
Yeah, Ryan, I so agree with that. You're absolutely right. There was a span of time when we didn't have an EPAC representative, and it was a little bit like being in the dark. I think one thing that could be done is to make sure that EPPs are aware that the EPAC meeting can be viewed, even if you're not an EPAC member. And so we actually do have people who are attending today who aren't members, just to watch and make sure that they have the information. And I don't think that every EPP understands that that's an option for them. So making sure that that's clear would probably help.
Anything else on this item? I really appreciate, again, the rich conversation on this, and I feel like we've been able to, talk through a lot of pieces and surface a lot of things. I did want to just flag a few more issues in the remaining time that we have and provide a little bit more information. The next piece is about upcoming SBEC rulemaking, and I would actually hand this over to a team member to talk us through what we're working on here.
Yeah, so this is one, I don't know, year or two EPAC asked for, just so we kind of see the horizon for rulemaking, and this sort of captures that timeline for what will be an adoption, a discussion, a proposal item in coming meetings. So you can see October is still going to be sort of pretty heavy on adoption items, finishing things out there with a few chapters, and then it'll narrow a little bit in December. We anticipate there are always things that come up and we need to pivot, but this is the current horizon for SBEC rulemaking over the next couple of meetings. So you can see that in a glance.
Thanks, Ryan. I'd like to talk briefly about ACEP closeout. So it is past the 15th of September, so our data is due and in, and I wanted to thank you and the folks at your organizations who were able to support this reporting. I know that this year was a little bit different because stuff's report only, because a bunch of data wasn't collected, but recognize that there was a lot of time and effort that was put into this. So generally, this was a successful season. So we did have fewer reporting requirements for educator preparation programs. There wasn't a GPA spreadsheet this year. We were able to bypass that entire back and forth with programs and with your data staff. Particularly, our staff provided direct technical support to a number of EPPs, and we were able to identify some underlying issues, both in some practices that are happening in ed prep programs and within our technical system, that we're able to now kind of like looking forward in our spirit of continuous improvement engage with. And as a reminder, I would be in trouble if I didn't say this. Reporting data throughout the year, including observation data, does simplify end of the year reporting. And I know that I feel like I get to say this kind of every time I talk about ACEP data reporting, and I don't know how to encourage you more. I know that I should capture testimonials from folks who do the reporting throughout the year about how the first 2 weeks of September aren't that big of a deal. Because you're able to, at that point, just kind of review what's there. So again, encourage you throughout the course of the year, also transparently, if we are able to troubleshoot technical problems throughout the course of the year instead of within the final 2 weeks. It provides our staff with more time to provide feedback and to troubleshoot and problem solve, and even the opportunity to get through and stand up some technical fixes when we have a little bit more lead time. So known challenges, I think it's important for us to name these and own these, right? So some of our educator preparation programs didn't report their admitted candidates throughout the course of the year using the admission system. This is a requirement, and we've been able to reach out specifically to our prep programs. I know that for some prep programs, if they had a principal program or other professional programs that may not have kind of been in the room around reporting, that this reporting had slipped through the cracks, and hopefully we've helped plug those cracks now. But everybody who's admitted into your educator preparation program within 7 days needs to be reported as admitted into the admission screen or an admission upload into ECOS. We did a whole stack of emergency fixes around this because this is a requirement. Folks who hadn't admitted people back from last September. So we've got a good beginning of the academic year now. This is a requirement, and we do hope to make sure you're going to do it. And we've chimed in on the newsletter about this. And we now have that second bullet point. I got an update this morning. We did individually insert. We got through the whole stack of admission records that we had to individually insert. As you might imagine, that's a big technical lift on our side as well. So just encouraging you as required to report those throughout the course of the year. The second piece, we recognize that there are challenges in observation reporting, and they are substantial at times. We had a lot of success working with our educator preparation programs who were doing this technical work in helping restructure files for uploading. But we also know that there were some, and we were able to work through a bunch of stuff, problem solving, counting commas, finding missing apostrophes, like not super fun work, but we were able to problem solve and support programs in problem solving a bunch around this. But we also are looking at how can we update our ECOS, our data validation in ECOS to simplify these observation uploads. So this is work that we're going to be engaging with our technical team this coming winter and spring to identify where might we be able to simplify this for the kind of the technical insides that cause a lot of observation records to not be accepted on upload. So we encourage you, as always, continue making clean CSVs and the rest, but we're gonna work on our side as well to try and simplify that, and so that it'll kick through fewer errors. And also, I would be in trouble if I didn't remind you or just mention to you all that if you do report your data throughout the year as it's generated, including observation data. This is data that you can report throughout the course of the year, and we do encourage you to do that throughout the course of the year because it does simplify your reporting, and that you can, those first 2 weeks of September can be really kind of easy. You're just reviewing the data that's already there. So please, we do encourage you as these data are generated for you to go ahead and report that data into the system. Again, that helps us provide more technical support throughout the course of the year and identify if there are any fixes that need to be made in our system. Finally, what are our next steps with ACEP? So where applicable, we are running our ACEP analyses, right? We are processing, downloading data, processing data, and we'll be generating reports to present back to y'all. Again, this year is report only. That'll be up for adoption, but we're moving in the kind of under the assumption that that'll be adopted and so we're planning on getting you your data, that report only data, provided back to educator preparation programs. And we're looking at also trying to schedule a follow-up ACEP webinar to help talk through kind of like as a after the fact kind of what happened types of stuff. We recognize that data coming back to y'all might look weird because we'll be using the same ACEP calculations that we always do, but you may know, we had a bunch of clinical teachers who didn't get the total number of observations in the spring. That's why it's report only. It's not for us to be holding accountable for. So this will be FYI data for y'all. And I also recognize that a number of educator preparation programs use this data in continuous improvement, in internal reporting. And so we did think that it was important to get this data back to y'all. Also, where it's applicable, we will be posting data to our dashboards. So we recognize that we don't have this for ASEP, but we do have dashboards that talk about the number of educators who were certified or who entered your programs, like how many candidates were applied, how many were admitted, how many were retained, how many finished. These types of dashboards, we are going to go ahead and update with data because we do have that information. And it is part of our public charge to provide that to the public. So the accountability stuff, we recognize that it's not going to look good if everybody didn't meet the observation numbers. But when we're talking about, you know, how many candidates were admitted in your program, we will be posting that information. And finally, I would miss the opportunity if I didn't mention to you all that I encourage you that you can report your data throughout the course of the year. For ASEP, and that includes observation data. So as the whole year goes by, you should feel free to report your data into ECOS and keep that ECOS data up to date, because again, that gives our team more time to provide you with technical support instead of crunched into just those last 2 weeks. I think I said this one, I'm sorry. But that is, it surfaces in ASEP every year, and we do encourage you to take that to heart to the extent that you can. Dr. Queen, I did appreciate you raised a question related specifically to the timing of formal observations at the beginning of the academic year. And I appreciate you for surfacing it because it has been surfaced by a number of other educator preparation programs. So what I had summarized from your comment was that the reality of COVID in schools, and this is people quarantine, the calendars changing, people getting sick, people not having access issues both virtually and in person. All of that has made the timing of the requirements for formal observations at the beginning of year a challenge. Dr. Queen, is that at a big picture kind of the summary of your concerns as you express them to us?
That is, we're dealing with teachers that are having to be quarantined because their own children are sick. And I have a couple of teachers that have been out for 2 weeks now for 2 different occasions because their own children were exposed to COVID, so they had to stay at home. We're dealing with 2 hurricanes, which we know there is some relief for that. But I have a field supervisor that has been hospitalized with respiratory issues. And so when you've got a tight window that you have to do that first observation in 6 weeks, and your field supervisor is hospitalized with COVID-like symptoms, it's very hard to change gears for me to bring another field supervisor on board in a remote area, train them, make a connection, because to us, it's about the relationship with the candidate. I don't want to just hire a cold person to walk in there and observe. For us, it's that observer needs a relationship with that candidate. And so that's a very tight timeline for some of those things to occur, 6 weeks, when we're dealing with a lot of these COVID issues.
And again, thank you for that. And that, like, I hope that you do feel some comfort in raising these issues, that you're not the only one, and that you're well represented among your peers in identifying these as issues. You know, and we've heard from districts that they do want to make sure that the interns that are in their schools are getting, the support and the observation and the rest as well. And so, I think that we all recognize that this is important support. But I did want to flag kind of like 2 ways that we're thinking about this concern and trying to think about where is there additional flexibility. You noted the flexibility around the overall duration, but there's also additional flexibility in 228.1d that talks about the delay of up to 30 days of any deadlines within 228. And so I think that we could see the deadlines related to the beginning of school as falling under the larger umbrella of that delay. So I think that we do have the opportunity to have additional space at the front end to meet that requirement. And then the second piece that I do want to flag for you all is that unlike the sort of just the number of durations, right? Did we have, the number of observations that we said that we had to have? And again, that's elsewhere in rule, that is evaluated every year on ASEP. This timing of observations is evaluated during your 5-year review. And so I think that one of the benefits of the 5-year review is it provides us with some ability to look at context and look at years sort of situated within their context, and to look at, normal years versus, kind of the COVID startup in the fall of 2020. And so I recognize and I greatly appreciate programs working to problem solve on this and provide that support for candidates like early in the year. But these are kind of the two that we would have, that there's additional flexibility offered in 228.1D, and that there's when we do go back and do this as an evaluation, as a compliance check, there's the opportunity to discuss this in this course of contact in the context of a 5-year review, rather than just the hard and fast, we run the ACEP numbers and we see if it was there or not, which is a little bit less contextualized. So that's kind of where we're at with that. That's kind of the response that I can offer right now, Dr. Queen. Does that help alleviate or provide some additional perspective on where we're at with it?
It does. So I'll just, we'll watch and see what happens as we move forward.
Well, and thank you again for raising it. The last thing is our other topics. I believe that Ryan put the link to sign up for the newsletter into the chat, and if not, we'll repost it. I really do encourage you to get this newsletter. So it contains timely updates, reminders, and deadlines, and it provides information for EPP support, for standards and testing, updates around educator certification, updates around SBEC, and we're really utilizing this as our main route for communication to ed prep programs. Again, background, this came out of especially during the first few months, during March, April, May, June, we were sending a lot of every email address we have at an EPP, sending just blast emails, kind of as stuff was hot and ready to go. And we looked at that and wanted to have a more structured way to disperse information, and then also for y'all to be able to share that information in a structure. And this also, newsletters, of course, we're working on setting up an archive, but lend themselves to a more structured archive for folks to go back and reference. And also, it's a place for us to kind of like go around the office and see, what else, what do we need to be sharing with educator preparation programs? And finally, that weekly cadence gives us the opportunity to really flag stuff that's important right now, along with kind of bigger picture long stuff. So of course, it's September and October, there are a lot of things that happen. There's a deadline here and there's a deadline there. There's a lot of things that happen at the beginning of the academic year. But then as we keep going on, as we think about the other opportunities for educator preparation programs to be involved, particularly around the standards and testing work, that there continue to be, we want to keep this line of communication open. So for our own feedback, we were wondering if you are currently getting the newsletter, how are you going about sharing that with other folks that are in your organization? And just wanted to kind of hear a little bit about that. And if you're not getting the newsletter, why not?
Well, this is Patrice. We're sharing with our faculty, both in CNI and other departments where teacher cert programs live. And we're planning to, I think what we'll do next possibly is, I think we'll send out this sign up link so that everyone knows they can sign up just to get it directly. And then the other key, we have a teacher education council internally, which is like a discussion forum thing, but then our advisory council also, we haven't shared with them yet, but I just put that on my list. We need to do this. And then I'm thinking through like district partners and stuff like that. Just kind of making our own communication plan around it. I really do like the newsletter and appreciate just getting this kind of focused look with all the stuff on it. You know, things have been coming kind of pieces and parts, and so this is really, really helpful. And when you get a tool like this, then we're just really building our plan around the sharing aspect.
I guess I also have a related question. Is there any section or content that might be missing from the newsletter as it's currently iterated? Stuff that you're like, well, it's not telling us about X, Y, and Z, just other opportunities for us.
I'd like to think about that a little bit. I go back and look at it, and maybe, because y'all, I can't remember exactly how many you've done now in this new format, but maybe do a quick survey for us to kind of look at it and give you that input. Because I wasn't focused on what's missing. I was focused on, oh, here's the stuff that I need. So, but I would like an opportunity, and, you know, like we may, it may go off of our radar, but doing a survey might be helpful, even embedded within the next newsletter. Since it's newish.
That's kind of a tight timeline for us, but
a few from now, you know, a few from now, not the next one.
No, I appreciate that as an idea, and I think we'll look kind of like on the technical side if we're able to do it. And in the meantime, if anything does come up, you can feel free to drop us an email about your thoughts and your thinking about that, because we'd really appreciate it. I'm not sure if Ryan is still on the line, because I'm not sure about the answer to the question that Dr. Clean raised in the chat, if there's a similar newsletter that goes out to school districts and HR. Ryan, do you know sort of I know that we have the To the Administrator addressed as a channel for communications directly to districts, but are there other types of standing newsletters or communications that you could speak to?
On the K-12 side, we're sort of operating within the larger agency structure of communicating through administrator address letters where appropriate. I think there have been some discussions along this line for HR folks through the years. So I don't know if Marilyn wants to add anything to that, but it's something we can definitely take back and discuss within our broader agency-wide communication.
Hi, everyone. I can come out of Technology Witness Protection Program for a nanosecond and just sort of confirm in terms of the district communication, we're continuing to share a lot of the things with organizations like TASPA, for example, and asking them to continue to push information out at the district level. So that is one place, but to Ryan and Mark's point, anything else that we can continue to do to strengthen that communication out to districts, we're on board to do. We'll continue to look for those opportunities.
So, and I appreciate, it looks like Melissa was able to drop the link back into the chat. So we do encourage folks to please do sign up, share as appropriate, and we will work to continue to provide those timely updates to y'all. Finally, just a reminder, upcoming SBEC meeting dates and upcoming EPAC dates. The next EPAC is scheduled for December 4th. I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that we will still be virtual at that time. So we will look forward to, again, being able to engage with y'all at that time. And that is, if there's any other conversations, things we'd like to bring up, I'm happy to stay, here and talk about stuff. But that was our agenda, what we had for today. And just really wanted to thank you all again for engaging in this space around these topics.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a really great rest of your Friday and weekend.
You too.
Thank you.
Clicked on the thing accidentally.
If you want to talk to Mark.
Yeah. Okay, you can go and start doing that one.
All right.
It's unmuted already.
Oh, it's unmuted already.
I can hear you.
How you doing, Mark?
I'm good. I'm gonna let you go, Dr. Kim.
Gosh.
It's unmuted. Look out.
Oh, it's unmuted. Look out. It always gets very interesting, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And my hat's off to you all that you can do this. I would just tell you, Mark, something to kind of think about is in EPAC, when you have people that actually are going through the program, they can kind of give you insight. Because like me, my background, I don't have the knowledge you have. So when I have a question specific to you, I go to you or to Emily or to Tim.
Right now is what we're
But having people that are actually in programs is kind of giving you background of, you know, that's a great idea, but is it feasible? Because my concern with